Hello there. Good morning. Well, as you can tell, I am not here today. I unfortunately was called into a meeting at the Strive Prep Central office, so you're all going to have to do some work without me today with the substitute here. So I thought I'd make a little video to explain to you what exactly I want you to do today. Well, where we left off last week was talking about the genocide in Sudan and how the US government failed to intervene even though they identified that genocide was happening in the Darfur region of Sudan. Remember, they didn't intervene because they tried to get the UN involved, but China, who buys a lot of Sudanese oil, said there was no way that genocide was happening. They denied the genocide because they wanted to continue to get their oil supplies. So this week, we're going to be addressing the following two questions, which is how should the United States respond to genocide? In other words, what policy should our government follow as to when and when not to intervene in genocides? Now, as the case in Rwanda pointed out, the U.S. didn't want to admit that it was genocide because they didn't really want to get involved. However, as we saw with the case in Sudan and Darfur, the U.S. did identify that genocide was happening and wanted to do something about it. The U.S. public had put a lot of pressure on George Bush and President Obama to get involved, but unfortunately, nothing really happened. On Wednesday, when I return, we are going to be having a mock Senate on the Foreign Relations Committee. As you can see, as pictured here, is the branch or the part of the U.S. Senate that decides U.S. foreign military policy of when and when not to get involved, and they often have more power in those decisions than the president. So when I return on Wednesday, we are going to have a debate. Several of you are going to take the role of the Senate committee members who ultimately make the decision of what policy the U.S. should follow as to when and when not to intervene. The rest of you will be presenting one of four potential options that the U.S. could pursue in terms of how they get involved in genocide or not get involved in genocide. So what you're going to receive from the substitute in a couple minutes here is a copy of the notes that will detail which option or which role you are going to play. So you are either going to be advocating for one of the policy options of what the U.S. should and should not do, and there are four of them. These are the four. Option one is that the U.S. should lead the world to stop the fight to genocide and should intervene as much as possible. Option two is to stand with the international community against genocide, that is to get the United Nations involved and not just be the U.S. Or option three, to support local efforts against genocide and to arm local groups and support local groups and provide infrastructure for local groups to deal with issues of genocide. Or option four, that the U.S. should kind of stay out of it and really only intervene in genocides if U.S. interests are directly threatened. So as I mentioned, you are going to play one of several roles. You are either going to be advocating for one of the four options, in which case you're going to receive from the substitute a set of notes that looks like this, and you're going to be doing some research today, looking at what would that option mean for the United States. So for each option, 1, 2, 3, and 4, you will get a reading, and in the reading, you need to identify what is the main idea of your option. What does that option say the U.S. should do in response to genocide? You then have to decide, or you have to explain, what are the values or beliefs that is based upon? Does the U.S. have a responsibility to help people? Does the U.S. only have a responsibility to its own citizens? What beliefs and values is your option based upon? You will also then need to identify what are specific policies or actions that the U.S. should follow if it uses that policy. And you need to explain why is that option, your policies, the best way for the U.S. to address the legal challenges of genocide, the economic challenges of genocide, and the military. Note that in this section you're not going to find this directly in your reading, but rather you're going to have to make some inferences. And finally, you need to be prepared to address arguments against your option. How will you address the people who argue against you and say that your option is wrong? Now, your job is to complete both pages of these notes. What you will get from the substitute based upon the option that you have is one of these documents which summarizes, you can see option number 1, which summarizes what your option is about, what beliefs drive that option, what policies the U.S. should follow if it chooses that option, and what the arguments are for and against that option. Again, as I mentioned, when you address the economic, legal, and military challenges, you're going to have to make some inferences. So some of you will be assigned option 1, option 2, option 3, and option 4. Those of you not assigned an option, you, on the other hand, are going to get a note sheet that looks like this with the backside like this. Those of you who get these sheets are going to represent the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Your job is going to be to listen to the presentations on the options and ultimately decide which option you think the U.S. should choose. And you will listen to each of the presentations on Wednesday. Now, to be prepared for that, you need to be familiar with all 4 of the options and be ready to have questions for the people presenting each of the options to your committee. So you're going to complete this organizer as you do the reading today. For each of the 4 options, you're going to have to identify what exactly does it suggest the U.S. should do in response to genocide? How does this option's views influence state sovereignty, the idea that the U.S. shouldn't get involved or maybe should get involved in other countries? Who is it that should take a lead in preventing genocide? Should it be the U.S. on itself? Should it be the United Nations? What should be done about genocides that are currently going on? And who's responsible for punishing? So you, ladies and gentlemen, on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee are going to get brief summaries of all 4 options and be responsible for understanding each of the options. When you're done with your readings, you need to come up with 2 to 3 questions for each of the options. So think to yourself, in our debate on Wednesday, several of your classmates are going to come up and present options to you, and your job is going to be to grill them with questions about the options. Why should the U.S. do that? Why should we believe you? Why should we follow your suggestions? Okay, that means you've all got a little bit of research to do today, ladies and gentlemen, whether you are assigned one of the 4 options and you're completing this organizing sheet here, or whether you're on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and completing this sheet here. The substitute will pass this out in just a second. But just to clarify who exactly is going to be in what groups, the substitute has a document of this sheet here. And he or she, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, substitute, they haven't told me at this point, will identify and go over this with you again. But you can see here, substitute, if you'd like to pause the video at this point in time, feel free to do that. Period 1, you can see here are those of you that are going to be on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and then those of you that are going to be advocates for each of the options. Let me clarify at this point that you are not working in groups. Just because you have been assigned similar roles does not mean that you are working together in groups today. Rather, you are researching similar things. The expectation today, ladies and gentlemen, is that you are staying in your seats and you are working productively and independently. Again, you can see here's period 3. There are those of you on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, each of you that have options 2, 3, and 4. And finally, period 6, there are your options as well. Again, substitute, feel free to pause here to make sure everyone is clear on what options they have and to distribute the packets for today for each student. Make sure also, ladies and gentlemen, that you have your folder from the black crate, and once you're done today, your notes should live in that folder. Also, I should just clarify that today needs to be a productive day. Just because I'm not there doesn't mean that you're going to sit there and do nothing today. Substitute, please make sure that students are sitting in your assigned seats. Yes, I'm talking about you, and you know who I'm talking to. You are very intelligent students, and I need you prepared for the debate that we're going to have on Wednesday. You have plenty of class time to finish your readings and complete your notes to be prepared for this. You will be presenting in front of class, so please make sure that you are prepared to do so. If you finish early, you've got some makeup work that you can work on. Please make sure that everything in your Unit 6 folder is up to date at this point. I look forward to seeing the work that you do on Wednesday when we have our debate. Please make sure that you are ready. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask the substitute or feel free to send me an email as well. I will be on my email while I'm meeting at Central today. All right, best of luck, folks, and stay on task. Seriously, substitute, if they're messing around, not doing their work, please send them to the office. They know that this is a classroom where we do work. If you can't handle that, ladies and gentlemen, you will be sent out. All right. Enough negativity. Have a wonderful day, folks. I'll see you on Wednesday.